Representative Cox to lead us in a prayer before we get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's bow. Father God, we're just so grateful that we have this opportunity to honor you in the way that we lead the state. You say in your word that you will go before us and make our crooked paths straight, and we pray you would do that now. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. The first thing we want to do today is to have a presentation on our state rail plan. I believe we have our chief engineer, Meg, here with us. If you would, just come on up and we will get started. Meg Perkle.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
First, I'm going to start off my presentation by letting y'all know some of our rail staff who is here. We've got Carol Comer, who is our Director of Intermodal, Nancy Cobb, who is over the Office of Intermodal Programs, and Stenley Mack, who's currently our Rail Program Manager. And last year, when we updated our statewide rail plan, the consultant who did the plan for us also developed a video as part of the plan update, and I'd like to first start off by showing y'all the video that demonstrates the plan, and then I'll brief you on a few other facts about it. So if I can, that's right. Can we have
The opportunities for the state to grow because of the rail are endless. It's going to be very important for the railroad to maintain that level of infrastructure investment, to maintain its level of good service so that we can accommodate the thousands of citizens that are going to call Georgia home in the future.
Back in 1970, really Atlanta and Birmingham were virtually the same size in population, very little difference. But in its time, the leaders took on the largest investment. It was a $500 million investment in a thing called Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport. Today, there's no comparison between what Atlanta and Birmingham is. And what it tells us is that you have to invest in order to grow. You have to build the infrastructure that businesses are going to need. And today we celebrate not just simply the busiest airport in the world, but all of the economic opportunity that is generated as a result. Rail is the same way.
For decades, Georgia and transportation have been synonymous. But before planes, there were trains, and Georgia was a leader there too. Beginning in the 1820s, rail lines grew and grew until the state had more rail miles than any other state in the Deep South. Georgia's freight railroads are divided into two categories. The Class I railroads, which are large, primarily long-haul regional rail systems, and short lines, which operate at a local level. Georgia has a strong system of nearly 5,000 miles of tracks, anchored by two Class I systems, CSX and Norfolk Southern. Together with nearly 30 short line systems, 500 miles of which is owned and leased by the state of Georgia, they transport 190 million tons of freight in nearly 4 million rail cars. According to the 2015 State Rail Plan, rail employs 6,000 people directly, but when all factors are included, rail-related employment tops 670,000 jobs, almost 13% of the total jobs. Rail-related jobs earn $32 billion, 12% of Georgia's total labor income. Statewide, rail transports items that touch our lives every day, thousands of products we find in any store we might visit. Agriculture, manufacturing, and coal lead the way in shipped tonnage, but the totals also include products from all across the state: cars, heavy equipment, carpeting, paper products, peanut, stone, kale, and cotton, and many others. The Port of Savannah is one of the busiest on the East Coast, funneling approximately 30 million tons of cargo into Georgia's transport delivery system during 2014. When its $700 million expansion is complete, the port will be able to handle the largest ships sailing the seas. Bigger ships mean more cargo, more containers that need to be shipped.
So much of our through traffic on rail, as well as our outbound traffic on rail, is intermodal. Those containers can be reused and reused and reused throughout the supply chain.
Cordele, Georgia is rural and part of the last mile of connectivity to the Class I rail system. It is the perfect marriage of location, and opportunity. The Heart of Georgia Railroad, a short line headed by Brad Lefevers, seems to be busy on all fronts. Lefevers operates what's termed an inland port, which serves as a regional rail truck transfer hub for goods traveling to or from the Port of Savannah.
The potential economic impact is tremendous. You just imagine that every one of these rail cars that you see going down the road is equivalent to 3.5 or 4 truckloads going down the road.
And one of Lefevers' clients is Stella Jones, a rail tie manufacturer.
The reason we are here is because Cordele is kind of unique in the fact that it has 2 Class 1 railroads that actually intersect in Cordele. And then we have the Heart of Georgia Railroad that actually serves our industry and connects to both of those railroads.
For many industries, short line availability can be a deal maker or deal breaker.
Since our products are heavy, both our inbound parts plus also our outbound machines, it's very critical that we can find that area where we can either ship intermodal or ship by rail to and from our facilities.
For Lafayette, the opportunity is new jobs, employment for 150 people at a new $60 million plastics company which needed rail access to its new plant.
In the case of Audia, this project wouldn't have happened without rail. Rail was important because so much of what they do is dependent upon rail. They have raw material that comes into the plant via rail, and they're actually sending finished goods via rail out of Walker County as well.
If you're an importer and you're looking for a place to build a distribution center, for example, you bring those out here, now you've created jobs in these areas that need them desperately. Every one of those jobs increase the tax base. Every one of those businesses do bring ancillary services and other businesses around them. Our old saying is industry begets industry. So once it starts, the ball keeps rolling.
So you're going to have new stores that are going to pop up. You're going to have different restaurants, things like that are going to pop up to provide for the needs that facility is going to have. And again, it's just there's a compounding factor. When you think about something like this coming to town.
I think one of the critical things that could happen is for the state to work with our industry to improve the quality of the lines that we're currently leasing. That would allow them to handle more product, to carry the product at a higher rate of speed, and also just carry heavier load.
A big selling point for rail over trucks is its efficiency, both environmental and financial.
A locomotive can move 1 ton of freight 500 miles on 1 gallon of gas. That is a tremendous advantage for freight rail from an efficiency standpoint as well as from an environmental standpoint.
We are looking at emission-friendly locomotives, and they will go into a yard operation at Inman Yard. And what these locomotives do is that the emissions from these locomotives are far less than what we use in the system.
And soon, with more engines like these, will come the advantages of cleaner and less expensive transport service.
That's a key ingredient in a way that the railroad industry is growing, because what that does is it takes trucks off the road, which is safer for all of the citizens of the state.
According to the Environmental Defense Fund, buses and trucks alone are responsible for consuming 125 million gallons of gas, as well as producing 450 million metric tons of climate pollution each year. So, of course, we would love to see some of that shifted onto rail where that pollution would be reduced.
Passenger rail is also healthy and growing.
We serve 178,000 people a year in the state of Georgia. 95,000 came from the city of Atlanta alone.
Intercity passenger rail and regional commuter rail are some of the greatest opportunities that we have before us here in Georgia. Investment in these systems represents not just an investment in our transportation systems, but also in the environment and the people that are part of the communities that we seek to connect.
This is something we're going to continue to look at, but I do think especially from a rail transit type situation, especially from the congestion around the metropolitan area, around Atlanta, that's something that's definitely going to be looked at for the future.
Due to limited funding availability, the 2015 Georgia State Rail Plan is only able to include approximately $8 million annually for state-owned short line track and bridge maintenance projects. However, identified improvements needed to maintain ideal service is estimated to exceed $45 million annually. With greater investment in maintaining this valuable service come far greater economic benefits.
I think that what rail provides is it enables the state's economic engine to really run at a much higher rate and a much more efficient way. And if we don't think that economic development is a full contact sport, we're wrong. That's why the rail system and the railroads, particularly the Class 1s, they're huge in helping us recruit the kind of industry that we want, but also making sure that existing industry has the resources to expand and be successful.
There is a huge advantage to a local community if they have rail access. All really it has to do is be interchangeable with the Class 1s, and it creates an opening of an opportunity to a world, literally a world of markets.
All right. Let me switch this to the slides. Y'all might recognize some of these A-list actors from that video here in this room. So, and we do appreciate all the help on the video. So just a briefing of what our state rail plan does include. So we covered the basics in the video, but as you can see, in terms of nationwide shipping with rail from Georgia, it takes about 1 to 2 days to get to most of the east part of the nation, and then about 5 to 7 days to get to the western side. But we have one of the largest rail network in the southeast, so we're greatly positioned to move any kind of goods and products from Georgia. Of the 50 states, this is how Georgia ranks. We're 4th in carloads terminated. You can see that we have $523 million in wages paid for rail-related jobs, which is, these are all huge economic benefits from rail to our state. So our existing rail system, which was highlighted in the video, but you can see it here, there's Norfolk Southern and CSX are the 2 Class 1s, and then we have other short lines. Some are GDOT owned, about 540 miles, as well as privately owned short line rail in Georgia. And then, of course, Amtrak has a northern connecting route and then the southern connecting route. So the state rail plan is a requirement of the Federal Railroad Administration. It's required to be updated every 5 years, and ours was updated in 2015. And it looks at the short and long-term needs for both freight and passenger rail. So it is looking at what the needs are in the state. It's not necessarily a program of planned funds, but it's what is needed to accomplish what the needs are in the state. So it looks at what are the capacity constraints in certain corridors, the maintenance needs, as well as priority corridors. So just looking at some quick facts about GDOT's short lines. We have 73 freight customers and 65,000 riders, 100 direct employees, about 16,000 carloads, and then about 10.1 million in revenue is earned by the operators of GDOT-owned short lines. And they typically, our average funding from rail bonds is about $8 million per year. These were the needs identified in the freight rail, in the state rail plan. Sorry about that. And you can see that it's the bulk of the funding that's needed is for safety, crossing improvements, and short line track and structure improvements. And there are also some long-term projects in there for short line rehabilitation and ongoing maintenance. So the total that this plan says is needed is about $54.7 million annually. Our historical funding for the last 3 years has been around $7-8 million a year. Previously, the average was about $5.5 million per year. And looking ahead at passenger rail, what is recommended in the plan, there are short-term projects for some ADA improvements at the 5 Amtrak stations, an update to the Atlanta commuter rail plan and the Atlanta to Columbus and Macon commuter rail plan. And then, of course, we are completing Tier 1 EIS documents for the Atlanta to Charlotte passenger rail, as well as Atlanta to Chattanooga. So the short-term projects mentioned in this plan would be to proceed to a Tier 2. But right now, those efforts are not funded. Long-range projects would include implementing a regional commuter rail network or intercity passenger rail. Currently, the Federal Railroad Administration is conducting a Southeast high-speed rail corridor study. This would go from basically Atlanta to Washington, D.C. So this is an effort that is driven in Washington by the Federal Railroad Administration. We are a stakeholder in that effort, so we are participating in the studies that they are doing. And along with that, Federal Railroad is also conducting a Southeast regional passenger rail planning study, and it includes the states that are highlighted on this map. Again, we are a stakeholder in that planning study, and this is a 50-year regional plan for passenger rail. And Representative Brett Harrell also is one of the stakeholder members of that committee, and as well as Marta is a member in the Atlanta Regional Commission from Georgia, and Janine Miller from the Department of Economic Development. And right now that study is progressing. They have not identified any specific priority corridors. They are looking at demand in specific corridors. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions about our rail plan or any other questions you have.
All right, Representative Williams, is that you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Quick question on the high-speed rail line. That runs from Washington to Jacksonville.
I believe it's to Atlanta, isn't
to
it?
Atlanta? No,
Yes,
well,
to Atlanta.
okay, so when it gets to Savannah, then it heads, because I see a spur going Jacksonville, if I'm looking at the right spur, right?
It's the Southeast high-speed rail corridor. I mean, it shows other possible connecting routes. It is a planning study, but the main goal of the planning study is to connect Atlanta from Atlanta through Charlotte, Greenville, up to Washington, D.C.
Okay. So what are the lines that you're running that comes through Raleigh, Columbia, and into? I'm just trying to figure that.
I believe that's the existing Amtrak
That's
line.
the existing Amtrak.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there is no existing Amtrak between Atlanta and Savannah right now.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I would ride it every once in a while.
All right. Representative Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At one point, as part of this plan, you were looking at some ways to divert some of the trucks and trains around Atlanta instead of into Atlanta. I've heard various reports about the results of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Are you familiar with that, Carol? Because I don't remember that being a part of this study. It was not part of this. Please feel free to come on up. Apologize.
Is this old news?
Well, actually, it's not. It's some fresh news, and I hadn't had a chance to tell Meg, but this morning we were on a conference call.
Talk in the mic so I can.
We were on a conference call with FRA, and they have undertaken to assist us a study of the freight railroad capacity in the metropolitan Atlanta area, which I think kind of goes to your diverting trains around Atlanta. So FRA is assisting us with evaluating any type of projects that might remove bottlenecks and make a more expedient flow of freight, which also affects
So it has
truck
to do
traffic.
with both trucks and trains?
You've had some truck studies, have you not, previously?
About.
If you want to talk about it offline, I'd be glad to talk about it.
I mean, we do have a statewide freight plan that looks at, where are the bottlenecks for trucks as well and where we need to improve those. And a lot of those are being addressed through our major mobility improvement projects that we're pursuing in our 10-year plan. So certainly with the increase of freight that we're expecting, we need to look at the bottlenecks both for trucks and rail, because they're both going to be increasing in use.
So you have a new spoke up in North Georgia and one in Cordele, or different ports?
For the inland ports?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and those are those both? No, one is Hog and one is CSX, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, and those are being operated by the railroads.
Uh-huh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Deffenbaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 4 of your slide presentation there, you show the top picture of an abandoned line possibly, or something. Is there efforts to reclaim some of the abandoned lines for the tier, 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it might be?
Let's see, is that this one? Is that this picture you're looking at?
On page 4. I mean, that just what brought it to mind. But the question is, are you reclaiming any old spurs or anything?
Not, is it this slide? This is slide 4. Oh, you have the 2 slides, okay, so I understand, sorry.
Page 8
I believe
or
that
slide
this
8.
is a spur
Yeah,
that we
there's-
connected on the Hog line. And so, I mean, yes, those opportunities do come up for new sidings and things like that.
Well, not necessarily new ones, but old ones. In North Georgia, I have, 50 miles of I think they're abandoned tracks.
I don't believe we have any plans right now to expand on any abandoned tracks. So the goal right now is to maintain what we have. And as
Okay.
the demand increases, there could be a need to go back on one of those tracks, but right now that's not part of the plan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you could look at the historical state funding slide. We talk about the last 3 years, and in 2017, we funded $8 million.
Yep.
And then down below it, it shows the average 5.5 million. And we're jumping to 42 million needed for annual maintenance? Are we going from 8?
That is based on the conditions of the track and the recommended needs of the plan. That is not in our budget request. That is just a planning need identified of the work needed on the tracks, okay?
I know, but I'm concerned, are we 5 times underfunding it by 5 times? Do we need to expect that in our budget request next year?
I don't believe we would be requesting that in our budget request next year.
It just was such a difference between, thank you.
I think the state, they own quite a bit of rail line in the state, and we're not keeping up with our obligations, the concern. One of the things I'll mention, too, to the committee, SB 89, which passed over in the Senate, would set up a line item in the budget specifically for rail, so that it would give us the opportunity through the appropriations process to specifically look at rail as a separate issue and the need there, so that we could address some of these concerns. The idea, President Pro Tem Schaefer introduced that bill and it passed the Senate. We've not taken it up, and he understands that. We've worked on this together, and over the summer we're going to try to have a couple of transportation meetings at various locations across the state, specifically looking at that need and that issue to try to see how the best way is to approach that and hopefully come back with some solutions to that in the next session. So go ahead. Anything else? Is there anyone else come on up, man, just give us your name. We want to give our other rail folks an opportunity to be heard also.
Yes, sir. Mark Middleton. I'm here on behalf of the Georgia Railroad Association. Other members of the team and were mentioned earlier, Connor Poe, who's here with Norfolk Southern, Craig Camuso with CSX, and Lynn Middleton, who's the executive director of GRA. And, just briefly, I appreciate you meeting this afternoon, because you probably are wondering, after crossover day, what are we looking at slides about freight rail for? Something that our association has been working on for a couple of years, and somewhat in conjunction with GDOT, after they came out with their report that Meg was referencing, it really laid out a tremendous need. And Chairman Taylor, to your point, there is a shortfall there. The shortfall is over a 40-year period, they identified some $1.2 billion worth of projects that could be done on state-owned rail alone. In the short term, next 3 to 5 years, they were looking at something in the range of $40 million that had been identified in projects. And the reason that it's so timely, we believe, to address this is because of the growth of the two ports in Savannah and in Brunswick. And as we seek to import and export more goods out of the state, as Craig mentioned on the video a little while ago, those goods have to go somewhere. And they're either going to go on a truck, and they're going to be on I-16 and US 341 and those other roads coming from the coast, or they're going to be on rail. And so the purpose of SB 89 that the chairman mentioned is to set up a program that is a line item in the budget. And then it would give us as an industry and other advocates within the transportation sector an ability to come in and talk to you about the needs that are out there and give you a place and talk to appropriators and leaders in both the House and Senate and obviously on the second floor about opportunities that are there to invest more in these state-owned facilities. And so that's what we intend to do here over the course of the next year, is to come talk to you about Senate Bill 89, answer your specific questions, to complement GDOT. When they came out with that report a couple of years ago, I was brand new to this industry. I had just come on with GRA, and it was a tremendous learning experience. And I've been through a lot of facilitated meetings over the years, and it was one of the best and well-run facilitations that I've ever seen. And the report, I wish I would have brought it. It's voluminous, and it has a tremendous amount of information. I, of course, am here on behalf of the freight rail industry, but there's a lot of information in there on passenger rail. There were a couple questions about that as well. So I won't go through the bill or anything at this point, Mr. Chairman, but I do know that the GRA and members of our organization will be coming to see you over the course of the summer, talk to you about the projects in your area. Just in the document that GDOT put together for the short term, I saw 12 projects I saw projects that affected 12 different short lines in the state. Those are situations where a private company is leasing that property, those tracks from the state, and there are shortfalls. The trains aren't able to move as quickly and as efficiently as they need to serve the state, and the investment that we would be seeking under this freight rail program would help in that regard. So we appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. I know a lot's going on across the street. So again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for accommodating us this afternoon.
I think you may have a question, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, thank you. I'm curious because maybe I'm just missing it on the charts, but when we look at the growth in Savannah and the huge growth of truck traffic from 16, and I'm wondering, it just seems like we're a little behind because this is a nightmare right now with trucks and our future highway needs. Maybe I missed it. What's on the board to decrease some of this through more use of rail freight transportation?
Well, I think the answer to that is twofold, Representative Williams. First, as you know, the members of our association, let's take the Class 1s as an example, Norfolk Southern or CSX. Those are private companies that invest huge amounts of capital in their facilities every year to better serve the ports. Craig and Connor here can tell you, Savannah is unique in that there are two Class 1s coming into a single port. And so as an industry, I think our overall cab rate is we spend about 19% of revenue that gets plowed back into capital. So from a private sector standpoint, those companies are doing everything they can do to stay at the head of the curve. And because Georgia's a fast-growing state, because great things are happening, it's hard to do. It's good, but it's a good problem to have. The situation that is addressed by Senate Bill 89 and what Meg addressed in her slides in regard to that 500 miles or so of state-owned line, those are lines that have been leased by the short line companies, and those are companies, railroads that tend to serve smaller communities. They may be a small business. I'm thinking of Cater Parrott down in the Valdosta area, very small company that runs just a few miles of track that feeds into the Class 1 that allows businesses in that area to be able to export, to get those goods over to Savannah and to Brunswick. And so they need some help. They're the ones that are leasing lines that the state has not been able, and I think, per the results of their report, have not been able to invest the money that they need to upgrade those facilities to be all to do the job that now is before us with that growth. And so from an association standpoint, what we see is a real opportunity through Senate Bill 89 is to create a mechanism for this legislature, as you all recognize the need for more investment in that area, to have a line item in the budget, have a program there that you can put money into. And it wouldn't be money that would obviously be coming to a rail company or to a private business. It would be money that you're plowing back into the state-owned line. So I would agree with the premise of your question, which is we have a lot of work to do. On the other hand, I think the state has shown, great, foresight. If you think about the lines that the state owned, many of those miles were purchased during a time when rail was really down. And then you may recall you went through a federal deregulation back in the late 70s when President Carter was in office, and things improved after that. But the state was able to come in and purchase some lines that had been abandoned, and it's really a credit to the state that they kept those facilities in play. And now that the economy has picked back up over the last few years, you've had companies like Heart of Georgia, which was mentioned earlier. They run from the Cordele area over toward Vidalia and eventually into the ports. They were featured in the video. They came in, saw the opportunity, and entered into an arrangement with the state.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, thank you, Mark. I think that's the only questions.
Yes, sir. Again, we appreciate the opportunity.
All right, we only have one item on the agenda, but if there's anyone else here in the audience that would like to say anything before we move forward, specifically on the rail issue, we'll be glad to. I know we got Craig and Connor representing two of our Class 1 railroads here, but appreciate them, what they do, and all of our short line railroads. In thinking about the SERTA bill we passed out last week and listening to the video talking about the airport and the foresight that our leaders had. So many times we get criticized when we make these tough decisions, but we have to be concerned of what history is going to view us. And we are standing on the backs of some great leaders in the past in our state who made some bold decisions. So we appreciate that and appreciate what our rail system does for our state. All right, on the agenda today, we have House Substitute to Senate Resolution 204. This is our annual road naming bill. You should have a summary that Abby's prepared for us with each of the resolution, Senate and House resolution numbers that are there. Take a look at those. If you have any questions, let me know. I know that Chairman Dempsey passed this out of subcommittee right before our full committee. I will tell you the original version that came over from the Senate did have a piece of legislation on it that we considered a two-subject area that had really nothing to do with the road naming, so we have removed that from the Senate resolution. So we'll be moving forward with this in a clean manner that we feel comfortable with. If there are any questions, we'll take it now on the resolution. If not, at this time it'd be appropriate to entertain a motion on House Substitute to Senate Resolution 204. Motion do pass. Do we have a second? Motion and a second do pass. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, the resolution 204 passes. That'll be heading on over to rules and ultimately to the floor. I will say that unless we have some reason to call a meeting, and if we do, we'll notify you. This will be our last meeting for the session. Appreciate the work that the committee's done. I also want to publicly thank both Jenna and Abby for their hard work, Legislative Council and our policy analysts. They've done great work in doing all this behind the scenes and keeping things running, and Zanita also in my office for her hard work, so we couldn't do it without them. So if you get an opportunity to say thank you to them, we'll look forward to rewarding them later. Thank you. We are adjourned.